Welcome to the Art of Being Human podcast. I am Rosemary, your host. On this podcast, we talk about the many different aspects of being human and give you an abundance of tools and insights to enhance and advance your happiness and life. Today's episode, I want to talk about ideology versus realism. I myself am an avid realist. I wasn't always a realist. I was far more an idealist, and that's how I know the difference between the two in a way that I can see how one was massively damaging to me and the other one is massively empowering, which also freaks people out enormously because people actually prefer the idea of believing in an ideology which isn't real, as opposed to looking at reality or accepting reality rather for what it is. And I believe that the difference between the two is really about understanding what is in your control and what is not in your control. And ideology is an interesting thing because we create ideologies around relationships and people and who we think they should be and who we want them to be. And that is like a whole conversation for another day because it's a huge topic, as opposed to being realistic with who somebody else, who somebody actually is, which is obviously the realism and the realistic point of view. And we also create an ideology on the world and how we want the world to be and hope, living in endless hope, which is all ideology, not reality. So my reason for wanting to bring this up is that this is a topic that people find so friggin' difficult to grasp if they've never thought about it, because they want to believe the good. People want to believe, hey man, everything's peachy, or hey, everything's going to be peachy, or hey, this world functions in a way that everybody's actually okay. But it's not the truth. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to look back in history or look at the way the world is and the way the world is functioning and the way most people function. And most people, including the leaders of the planet, are just children in adult bodies. Most people are not taught emotional intelligence, and the only way to really have a better world, an idealistic world, is for people to be emotionally intelligent and realize that they are not the most important thing on the planet, like to live from a space of equality as opposed to greed. So when I bring something like this up, I've had people get really upset with me before, because that is just like you fucking up their bubble that believes that everything is beautiful and everything's peachy and everything's going to be peachy. It's almost like it takes the ego into the space of this massive threat. Like, how can you tell me the truth when my lie is so good? And it's so interesting because ideology is really a lie, where realism is living from a space of truth. But we have to get to a space in ourselves where realism doesn't scare us, where realism doesn't make us feel completely threatened, whether it be as a species, as a human being, within relationships, within however we have all these different ways of identifying with how we fit into this world. But I believe realism is about taking your power back because it's honest, because it's truth. I love the saying, hope for the best, expect the worst, because I don't see it as this doomsday thing. I believe it's a grasp on reality. It's like, if you're in a toxic relationship with somebody, which I believe most of us are in a toxic relationship with the planet, let's just say, or the way in which this planet functions, it's a toxic relationship that most people have. They just don't even realize they're in that toxic relationship. And that also goes then, of course, when you narrow it down to individual relationships that people can be in toxic relationships. But they rather want to believe that somebody or something is the good that they hope it's going to be, as opposed to taking that reality and going, no, this is just the way it is. And how do I fit into that? And how do I relate to that? And how do I empower myself through knowing what the truth is, as opposed to continuing a toxic relationship based on a fear of looking at the truth? I love this subject because I believe it takes a person from being in a space of powerlessness, which is fast asleep, which is living completely in the ego, as opposed to a space of power inside yourself where you have the ability to look at everything from all different aspects because you have the truth. You actually have the facts as opposed to what you want to believe. It's very easy to live a life of what you want to believe as opposed to living a life of what is actually true. And we have that power within us to make that call, to make that decision. But that's where the challenging of the belief system comes in, which is really good. Because if a person feels threatened by going, hey, the world's a shit show, and goes, no, you can't say that. I've still got a life to live, or I've still got kids to raise, or I've still got grandkids, or whatever the reason and the excuse we will make to justify why we don't want to accept a fact that the world is perhaps a shit show, as opposed to just going, yeah, the world's a shit show. That doesn't need to make us feel threatened or scared or powerless. If anything, it should go, okay, well then how do I want to relate to this if that is the facts? So that is my 5 cents worth on ideology versus realism. One, I believe empowers you because it's the truth. And one, I believe keeps us disempowered through fear of actually seeing the truth. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. And I look forward to meeting you again in the next episode.